Okay, you ready? Well, welcome to Don't Eat the Soup as Hot as They Cook It. That's what we used to call this. Then we shortened it to Cooling Down Stress. Now today is an experiment. I have never done one of these where we've tied it in where there's going to be a fair bit of spiritual here, all right? Just to tell you a little bit about who I am, in case there's some of you here who don't know, my name is Pastor Cameron Johnston. I really liked what our treasurer said when she introduced all the pastors yesterday, and most of you weren't here. But she said he's retired, but not practicing. I thought that was pretty good. Because currently I am just on a 6-month assignment up pastoring the North Sydney church because I have a pastor coming, but they haven't had a pastor for a while, so I'm kind of there for a little bit. Delightful little church up there, so I'm having a grand old time up there. But let me just give you a little bit of my background before we jump in. I'm going to share, once I stop talking about a few little odds and ends, I'm going to share my experience with burnout. And there are 2 reasons why I do this seminar. I don't do very many of them anymore, but I still do a few here and there. But there's 2 reasons why I do them. Number 1 is to help folks never have that experience. But even in a smaller group like this, there's a good possibility that somebody is some of the advanced stages of burnout. And I want to give them hope that they can recover, all right? So a little bit on my background. I'm actually a Maritimer. I grew up in New Brunswick. Yeah, Perth Andover. By the way, any Perth Andover guys, folks got down here? You guys from Perth Andover? Yeah, see, I haven't been to Perth Andover Church for so long, and all the folks I knew, they're gone to glory. I know as admins we don't like to use that term. They're having a little nap while they wait, right? And so when I go to the Perth church now, you know, even you folks, you know, you don't know who I am, I don't know who you are. Yes, you probably knew my mom. She's been even gone a while, so you've been there a while. Yeah. And so I began my ministry here in the Maritimes. I usually don't tell folks this, but you know John the Revelator in the book of Revelation? He went to the Isle of Patmos in his late 80s, early 90s. I went in my 20s. You heard of that little island out in Grand Manan Island out there in the Bay of Fundy? Yeah, we spent 2 years there while I pastored the St. George Church, and we have a number of the Cook tribe here today and here at camp. So I actually was a pastor here in this conference for 10 years. I actually pastored this district, Pugwash, New Glasgow, and Truro. In fact, our 2 girls were born in New Glasgow. And then we moved to Newfoundland and we spent 10 years in Newfoundland. And then because of a whole variety of reasons, I moved from pastoring into doing ministry by business, through business. I basically, and the story I'm going to share in a little bit, I actually experienced a major, I call it ministry burnout, but it's job-related burnout. And then for the next 15 years, I basically did the core of this seminar I'm going to share with you today. I did with a whole variety of groups. I did it with business groups. I did it with teacher groups, healthcare, you name the group, I probably did it with them, right? As well as church groups. And I did that for 15 years. Never really thought I'd ever end up going back pastoring. But you know, the Lord has interesting ways of moving us around here and there. And so in 2010, I ended up going back pastoring full-time for 5 years. Actually, I went back pastoring my first sermon back pastoring was on my 60th birthday. And so I did that for 5 years, and then I semi-retired. I pastored another little church. I bet you all heard of Bella Coola. Anybody who has not heard of Bella Coola in British Columbia? Oh, we got a couple folks. Bella Coola is one of those places that just about every Adventist seems to have heard of. But in a way, I pastored half-time there in Bella Coola for another 5 years, and officially retired just as COVID hit. And so we did roam around a bit during COVID, ignoring some of the rules, because when you have one kid in the U.S. and one in Australia, you ignore as many of the traveling rules as possible, but you couldn't go to Australia anyway. So that's just a little bit of my history. Now, a couple of things in regards to this seminar today that is kind of unique, because I'm going to basically share with you the same principles that I've shared with all kinds of groups. But we're focusing it a little bit more on managing stress at the time of the end. Now, we're all aware, and I'm assuming most of you you're either Adventist or you have a very close connection with Adventists. And we are the church of the time of the end, right? And we have been in the time of the end anywhere between 150 and 200 years. You know, some Adventists say, you know, the time of the end started in 1798, some of it 1844, and, you know, time of the end actually began when some of us were born, I suppose. But we talk a little bit about the time of the end. And this morning, as I woke up thinking, my brain must have been thinking about this seminar, you know, as I was waking up. And you know, our theme song, you know, the days of Elijah. Nice little song, isn't it? I think it's our president's, one of his favorite songs. I heard somebody say that. But just think about this for a minute. The first 4 sentences of this song, I'm not going to sing it for you. You can praise the Lord for that. These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of your servant Moses. Righteousness is being restored. I don't know if you've related this song to the fact that Elijah, for 3.5 years, lived under a death decree. We don't apply that to this song. This is kind of an evangelistic song, right? But he lived for 3.5 years under a death decree. Now, if anything that Adventists are scared of is the time of the end. No, it's not the time of the end. It's a few days before the end of time. Right? And so as you think about this song for the rest of the week, think about the fact that God took care of Elijah under a death decree for 3.5 years. Moses was born under a death decree. And the Lord, when he was born, only lived a little while before he had his first death decree, right? But just think for a minute about Elijah. You know, the Lord sent him in there to the king and said it's not going to rain for 3.5 years. And when that really took effect, they came looking for him. And he was out there by the brook, being fed how? Now, have you thought that through? Have you used your imagination on that a little bit? Those ravens were not bringing him roadkill. You think? I don't think so. You know, the Lord likes to do things differently, and we just don't know what they brought him, but I'm suspicious they probably brought him manna. But we don't know. But every once in a while, I wouldn't be a bit surprised, and that raven was told by an angel to go over and check out the palace. Maybe they're having a picnic. Bring him a little snack of something. Don't you think? Maybe he picked up, you know, I'm not sure what all they ate. One of those big round pieces of bread with something in it. Right? Maybe one time he brought him a piece of mutton. Elijah wasn't an Adventist, you know. So he might have had a little bit. We don't know what the angel brought, right? But I do know it was not roadkill. Then the part that really fascinates me about Elijah is after the brook dried up. I don't know if you're aware of this, but after the brook dried up, you all know that God sent him up there to that little town where there was a widow that needed some help. Do you know where that was? That was the backyard of Jezebel. God hid him in plain sight. Isn't that interesting? So there is some parallels. And, you know, this whole thing with the time of trouble, we don't need to be afraid of the time of trouble. Now, I told some folks yesterday, you know, I really want to live till the Lord comes. Now, you just got to look at me and you know, oh boy, he better get going. Now, it really doesn't matter to me. If the Lord says it's better for you to go to sleep and just relax, you know, have a little nap for a couple of years, that's fine with me too, right? But I'd really like to be on this planet when I see those wicked old beasts do their worst, and the Lord taking care of his people. Now, why do I think that's possible? And the reason I think it's possible for me to live that long, and some of you, you know, some of you might have to live to 100, right, to be around when he comes. But that's okay. But the reason I believe that is back in 1971, when I was a senior at Southern Missionary College, now Southern Adventist University, a revival broke out. Anybody heard about that revival? I've met a couple of folks that were part of that as well as myself, but there was a revival that broke out. It started at Andrews University with one of the youth leaders from the General Conference. Was doing a week of prayer. I think it was the spring of, anyway, it was in there somewhere. But it was through about 69 through to 71 or 72. But it was a major revival among Adventist youth. And I want to tell you, we all believe we're not going to get old. He's going to come long before we get old. And now we're all old. And some, you know, are already asleep. But he's coming, and when he comes, when the Lord comes, it's going to be a shock, not only to the world, it's going to be a shock to everybody. You think back to Noah. Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah. Even Noah was shocked. I mean, he spent 120 years building this big old boat. And when it started to rain, I think he was shocked. Right? And when the second coming comes, it's going to be a surprise for everybody, even though we know it's coming. You ever had that kind of a surprise? You know it's coming, and it's a surprise when it comes? Your first kid was probably that way. So we're just going to kind of adapt stress. But you notice that little slide that's up there? Jesus said what? Let not your heart be troubled. One of the things that troubled me the most about COVID was how many Adventists were troubled. I mean, very troubled about sometimes some nonsensical stuff, right? But Jesus says, let not your heart be troubled. We can relax. And you're going to hear me say it a dozen times probably here this afternoon. We need to just learn how to relax and enjoy the process. Because this world hasn't even started to fall apart yet. It's falling apart in front of our eyes. But it's going to fall apart a whole lot more, don't you think? And so we're going to share with you some very basic principles that, lost my little clicker here. So let's just talk a little bit about our seminar goals for today, and then we're going to jump right in. But basically, I want to somehow just share with you some principles that will help you just manage stress in troubled times. And we're living in troubled times. If you're following, that's the other thing I don't understand about Adventists. They don't watch the news. Oh man, you want to watch the news at least once a week and compare it to Daniel and Revelation. You're going to miss half the fun. Now, I know some people get all stressed about the news. Well, figure out, I'm going to share some things to help you relax so you can take it in. But, man, you got to watch what's going on, right? It's global. You know, we've had earthquakes, we've had wars, we've had all the signs happening. There's some new ones. And they're global. And we've even had a couple of global wars. Who knows how many more? But not probably very many, because, man, we can destroy ourselves so easily now. But anyway, I'm going to share some principles and then somehow help you to begin the process of relaxing and enjoying the process of life. Just because life's difficult doesn't mean we can't enjoy the process. Actually, life's pretty difficult at best of times anyway. And so I'm going to also introduce you to some really excellent stress management resources. And then a little clue. This is the clue we need to get. Right? Managing the stress in the last days is all about our relationship with the Lord. And it's the relationship with the Lord. Now, I'm going to throw something else in that we're not charging you for, and I almost forgot it. About 6 months ago, I woke up and I decided I was going to read the Laodicean message, because something had triggered something. And I was wondering, what is it that Laodicea is lukewarm about? Being lukewarm is no problem. I don't mind being lukewarm. Actually, I like being lukewarm. Your body operates as lukewarm. But what is Laodicea lukewarm about? You read it through very carefully when you have a moment. Laodicea is lukewarm about Jesus. They're not lukewarm about missionary work. Adventism has gone around the world. Laodicea is lukewarm about Jesus. And Jesus has a solution. He says what? Come to me. Open the door. Let me in. We'll have lunch. Right? And that will take care of it. Anyway, I could get off on some of that. I got to be careful here. We're supposed to be talking about stress. Okay. Let's go to the next one. ABC brought their little thing in here just as we get ready to start. They're over at the junior cabin, and they have a whole bunch of copies of my book, Cooling Down Stress. They want to sell them. And as we go through some of these principles today, I'm going to share with you the chapters in here that expand on some of the stuff I'm going to share with you today, okay? So they've got a good supply, because now it's available over at the ABC, has been now for a while. But before we go on, I want to just share with you my qualifications for doing this. Now, it's true, I have, a master's degree from Andrews. I have one from Loma Linda in public health. I've done a number of these things. But that's not what qualifies me to do this. What qualifies me is I survived. I survived, and I'm going to share a little bit of that story with you. It was the summer of 1985. That's 40 years ago. 40 years ago this summer. It's hard to believe it's been that long ago. But I'd been, we're pastoring a little church in Outport, Newfoundland, and there may be some of you here, there may be some of you listening online that know some of my story back there in Newfoundland. But that summer, the little church that I was pastoring, we had a school. That was back when the Adventists was one of all the schools over there were operated by the churches, and the Adventist church had a system there. And we had a little school of about 20 students. And we met in the same building, just a little building. On Sabbath, we'd have church there, and then we had 2 teachers, and they would be in that same little building for all week with these 20 kids. And the church was dreaming about having a new church and a new school. And they had a piece of land that was just next. I don't know where they came up with that money, but they had a little piece of land right beside, and they had a dream to build this building. And so we come there, and the conference president and myself, I'm not sure what was the matter with us. And just so you know, some of you may know Elder Dave Crook. He may even be watching on the thing. But he was the president, and I was the pastor, and we got together. We figured out how we're going to do this, and I think both of us were not quite, something wasn't quite right. Because we didn't have the money. We didn't have the resources. But somehow that little church had the vision for this new building. And so we actually somehow came up with enough money to get this thing going, and we, by the way, I should stop right there. You know, money is never God's problem. Most of our churches don't know that. Did you all hear the devotional thing this morning with, the name's gone from me, but yeah. A good example. The Lord don't necessarily always give you the money up front. And you know, after we finished that project, I still don't know where the money came from. It's like me going through school. I went through college with no money, and I can't figure out how I did it, right? He has his ways of taking care of us, right? And somehow we had enough money. We had some kind of a process in place that I couldn't explain to you if I wanted to. And so then we made an arrangement with Maranatha. I think you're probably all familiar with Maranatha, that group that finds people from all across North America. They come and help you build churches and schools. And so we had requested 50 people to come and help us build these buildings the summer of 1985. Well, this little outport we were in, how do you take care of 50 people? So we had to, you know, figure out a way how we're going to feed them. Some of them would bring their campers, and some of them we had to find some housing, and we had to feed them all together in a way. And so the Canada Day, the long weekend of 1985, we had, I think, 8 or 10 people that they were from all across Newfoundland, had specific skills, going to come and help us get ready for these 50 people. And so we had everything ready for these 8 or 10 people to come. And then I realized about 4 o'clock Friday afternoon that there were some nails that we didn't have. And so I went down to the hardware store to pick up these 3 or 4 pounds of nails, whatever it was. And as I was coming to the checkout, without warning, I started to shake. Now, I cannot illustrate this completely because my entire body was shaking. And by the time I paid, just come right in, just get a handout. We'll talk about the handouts after. But by the time I paid for those few nails and got to my car, my entire body was just uncontrollably shaking. I could barely drive the kilometer home. So I get back home and I come in, and my wife's in the kitchen preparing for supper. And she looks at me and she says, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I don't know, but I think I should go lie down." So I went in and laid on the bed, and the bed and I shook together. I mean, I laid on the bed and we were just shaking away there. And an hour later, she decides to come in and check up on me. And there I am, me in the bed shaking away. And she had a typical female reaction. You got to go see a doctor. Now, in that little outport, at that point in time, we only had 3 doctors. I don't know if we got any doctors here, but there was only one of them who knew what he was doing. And I said to her, listen, I don't think there's a rush. And of course, you men, you know you're not going to go see a doctor looking like that anyway. Because by the time you get there, it's going to stop. And how do you explain why you're there? You know the story. So somehow I talked her out of it. And she went on with whatever she was doing, and me in the bed stay there and shook away. She comes back in about 8 o'clock, 8:30, and nothing had changed. It got no worse, no better. And then she put her foot down. She said, you gotta go see a doctor. Well, I said, we only got 3 doctors, and I gotta go down there. We're gonna have to wait. See, back then you had to wait 4 hours. I mean, now it's 12 or 15 or 20. But it was still 4 back then. This is 40 years ago, right? And so I said, why don't you call them? I mean, doctors didn't make house calls back then any more than they do now. But I said, we're in a little town. We got 3 doctors. Maybe some of them are looking for something to do. You call them. See if they'll come. I don't know what she told this guy. She got a hold of one of them. I don't know what story she told him, but he agreed to come. And while he was coming, I said to my wife, you watch. He's going to come in here. He's going to do what doctors do, check my heart, check my blood pressure, poke something down my throat. And then he's going to tell me I have the flu. Now, in those days, in that little outport, flu was very popular. Any time of the year. So he comes in, 8:30, 8:45, something like that, Friday night. He comes in, checks my heart, do my blood pressure, does what doctors do. And then he looked me straight in the eye. I mean, just straight in the eye, and he says, you have the flu. I said, Doc, I have had the flu. This is not it. Anyway, he was convinced. I mean, you ever try to tell a doctor you don't have what they think you have? Yeah. So he writes a prescription and it's gone. 11 o'clock that night, it stopped just as quick as it started. I had no idea what happened. Now, back then, nobody knew what burnout was. Even the doctors didn't know. They had the word was floating around, people talked about it a little bit, but nobody really knew what it was. And I definitely didn't know what it was. I did not know that that was an extreme stress response. And we're going to talk about stress warning signals in a few minutes. And when I finally realized what stress responses were, and I went back 2 or 3 years before we ever moved to Newfoundland, I was having a number of very serious stress warning signals. And if I'd had any idea what it was, I should have done something. But if I would have known then what I learned over the next 2 to 3 years, I would have immediately taken stress leave for the next 6 months. And you'll see why later this afternoon when we go through the stages to burnout, and I'll show you exactly where I was, okay? Well, we got the school built. Now, that was an interesting summer. We were expecting, I told you, how many people? 50 people. 1st of August, we got 25. Average age, 70. First week on the job, a really nice elderly lady who had just recently done the health age appraisal, and they told her she should live to be 100, drops dead on the job. It was that kind of a summer. We had 4 really good carpenters that came from all across the U.S., 4 different areas in the U.S. They are working alongside Newfoundland carpenters. None of these carpenters built buildings the same way. The person least qualified to make a decision among 5 or 6 good carpenters and tell the others to get in line, I mean, it was just that kind of a summer. We got the school ready for classes in September. The church sat there half finished for the next 2.5 years. Or no, it wasn't that long, 1.5 years or so. And if you can hate a building, I hated that building. And it just took us a long time to get that thing done. And by the time we actually got it done and I moved out of that district, it was 5 years before I could go back and sit in that building and actually enjoy the building, right? So anyway, school starts. Our children are still preschool at this time. And so we decided that we needed to find some heat. Now, some of you, I recognize a couple of you here that, how many of, any Newfoundlanders here? Or folks that have worked in Newfoundland? I know some folks here I see that I know have been in Newfoundland, worked in Newfoundland. It never gets hot over there. Newfoundlanders think it gets hot. Like Maritimers think it gets hot. You know, I was up in Sydney about 3 weeks ago and I had to stop in a little shop to pick up something. And here was this guy, it was 24 degrees, water pouring right off of him. I said, "You're a Maritimer, right?" And that particular summer was colder than average. And so we needed heat. So we decided, I had a week's vacation, or a month's vacation, and I decided I was taking 2 months, worked it out with the president, and we took off. Now there's something you need to understand about extreme stress. If you are in an extreme stressful situation for a prolonged period of time, and you finally relax, that's when it really hits you. Well, as we got ready to leave the first week of September, I must have already started to relax a bit. Now, we were 8 hours from the ferry. And so, when we left town, about 3 hours in, it hit me. And I went into the worst depression that I would not wish on my worst enemy if I had one. I did not have a positive thought for the next 3 weeks. And so we went down along the eastern seaboard. I want to tell you, it's that bad, you don't pray much. I'd walk up and down the beach and I'd say, "Lord, I don't know what's going on, but you got to get me through this." And that was about it. And so we got down to the Carolinas, the Outer Banks of the Carolinas. And we'd been just camping in a tent, and we hadn't been listening to the radio much. And so we didn't know what the weather was, but we knew we needed a shower. We needed a nice hot shower. And so we find this campsite that is advertising hot showers. And we go in about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. This is now September. It's beginning to get dark. And we noticed as we parked the car and we dug out the tents, the ground was really spongy, which is not normal for campground. And the mosquitoes, oh, the mosquitoes. I mean, it reminded me of some times I've been here at Pugwash. Mosquitoes aren't bad here. I don't know what you guys do to keep the mosquitoes down, but they're nothing compared to what I remember back 30 years ago. But the mosquitoes were everywhere. We finally got the tent pitched. We got the kids in there. We got them to bed. And as bad as we wanted to shower, there was no way we're going to crawl out in those mosquitoes. So we just all go to bed. So first thing in the morning, as soon as I woke up, man, I'm ready for this hot shower. So I crawl out. I go over to the wash house. I get to the wash house, and I hear screams coming from inside the building. I mean, serious screams. And then as I go in the door, as I go through the door, this man's coming out, and he says, "Man, is that water cold." And it was cold. Now, I'd had cold showers before, but it had been a while since I had one. And so I finally get there in the shower, and if you haven't had a cold shower for a long time, you do it very delicately, right? You stick a couple toes in, you gradually get in there, and you gradually get to the point that you can get under that water. And so I had the cold shower, come out, go back to the tent. By then my wife, she's raring to go. And I said, "Dear, you're going to be wide awake when you come back." You know, by the time she comes back, half an hour or so later, I'm feeling good for the first time in months. And it lasted 2 hours. Right after breakfast, I went back and had another cold shower. That day, I think I had 10 cold showers. I share that story with you because that was a turning point. I mean, I was 5 years in recovery, but that was a turning point. And I had cold showers all the rest of that trip. I got back to my parents' folks in New Brunswick, and I realized that in Florida and Carolinas and all those places, they don't even have cold water. If you've been down in Carolina, that water is not cold. I want to tell you, anybody had a cold shower here? Yeah, I had one this morning. It's seriously cold, right? Now, I should just warn you before I go on that if you've never had a cold shower, and there's some really good health benefits to a cold shower. I mean, I've just been doing it forever since, but even my wife does it now. Now I have a process. You know, you take a nice warm shower and hot shower, warm shower, and you finally get finished. They used to tell us you needed 3 to 4 minutes of cold. Thankful research has said that 1 good minute is just about as good. But the reason I'm warning you a little bit is back when we used to do the 5-day plan to stop smoking, we always wanted to get people off of caffeine because it triggered the urge for nicotine, right? And so after all this had happened, I was in Corner Brook with the pastor there doing one of these 5-day plans to stop smoking, which we don't really do anymore because this doesn't fit anymore. And so the process of that, I shared with the group. We had about 30 people there trying to quit smoking, and I shared with them that story about the cold showers. And the next night, you know, when we do the little thing where you kind of talk about it a little bit, this lady raised her hand and she says, "I tried that cold shower this morning, and I seriously considered killing you." So if you haven't done it for a while, do it gently. I just don't want you to come after me. Now, just to finish up that story, we went on to Florida. We came back. We were gone for 2 months. I finally go see a doctor. And I explained to him what happened. He says, "You have used up basically all your emotional, physical, all your energy's done." But he said, "You've been off work for 2 months. I really can't sign you off now. He said, I suggest you would work half-time. So I talked to a president, and he was fine with it. So I worked 40 hours a week and thought I was on holiday. But it took a good 4 or 5 years before I could say I was beyond that. So that's why you don't want to go there. And if you find yourself, when we go through the stages of burnout a little bit later, then you want to get back out of that. You don't need to go any further. So we're going to jump in for a little bit. I'm going to share a couple things with you, and then we're going to do a couple little assessments. Now, I'm going to share with you now, brother, why is this thing not happening? Something went to sleep. Here we go. The ABCs of surviving in today's 24/7 world. You know, we've been in a 24/7 world for a few decades already. But there's 3 things you need. And we're going to come in and around and through these a number of ways, number of times as we go through to this afternoon. But A is awareness. Now, let's just stop here for a minute. Did everybody have a handout? And everybody's got a pen and a handout. You don't have one? No handout? Just come right up here. There's some up here. And there's some pins there. And again, I want to remind everybody, leave your pin back on the table. These aren't ours. But anybody else needs one? Oh, here's the lady right here. I didn't see you there. So anybody needs a handout, because there's a number of things you're going to want to fill out as we go along. And you're definitely going to want to do the stress test that we're going to do in a little bit. Anybody else need a handout or a pen? Okay. So awareness. A is for awareness. You need to be aware of what is causing you stress, which is relatively easy to figure out. But more important, you need to be aware as to how stress is affecting you. And so we're going to share with you some tools that will help you be able to figure that out. Okay? So basically, the session until we get to the break is pretty much awareness. In fact, most of what I'm going to share is awareness, but we're going to share with you some very basic principles as we go along. So A is awareness. B is balance. You need to find out what is balance for you. Now, balance is different for everybody. Some people can handle huge amounts of stress, and they just thrive on it. There's other folks that can't handle much stress. I actually had a lady in a seminar one time, this was years ago, who really had no stress, and she was stressed. I had a hard time believing she was stressed. She came up, we talked after the seminar, and I asked her, you know, all these questions, and there was no stress. But she got a terrible score in the stress test. I don't remember how we helped her solve that, but I think we had to get her some stress. And sometimes, by the way, that's the other thing. We have a fellow coming probably today, a good friend of mine, Don Straub. You noticed him in the brochure. I worked with Don for a number of years in Kelowna, when we lived in Kelowna. And Don started out as a teacher, then he was a pastor, and now he's a counselor, done some training. He's retired also, but not practicing. Yeah. And you'll appreciate Don, because when we talk about deep-seated stress today, if you're struggling with deep-seated stress, you want to get his seminar this week, right? And you'll figure out what that is as we go along. But how did I get off on that? Oh yeah, Don, when he started teaching, now Don is one of these extremely organized people. He's one of these teachers. You know Don. He is so organized that by the time school starts, he's got all his photocopying done. He knows exactly what he's going to do. So he teaches his classes by 3 o'clock. He got nothing to do. And one of the first teachers' convention he went to, he was stressed. And he goes and takes this little stress seminar that somebody was putting on. And you know what he discovered? That he was bored. He was a high school teacher, right? And he was bored. He had to get involved in extracurricular activities, church stuff. Man, that guy can do more. And on top of it, he's high energy. You know, it's just not fair. You know, these folks that can work all day and half the night, 3 hours sleep, and they're raring to go. Some of you might be like that. Life's just not fair. I need my full 8 hours, plus I got to eat right, do the exercise, do all that stuff just to get through the day. I mean, life's just not fair, right? So you have to figure out what is balance for you, all right? And it's different for everybody. The ones that really fascinate me, I just love watching the U.S. presidents. I've been watching them now for the last 20 years. I mean, they had that guy McCain a while ago, 80 years old, wanted to be president of the United States at 80. I mean, most people 80, they want to sit around with their slippers on. I mean, this current guy, I mean, I have little challenges with him, but I'm fascinated by his energy levels, especially for eating hamburgers. Right? But some people just have more energy, right? And they can do more. And if you don't have that kind of energy, don't try to follow them, right? You'll be stressed. So we find balance, and we have to learn how to balance with life. Number 3 is a very important one. C is control. You need to take control where you have control. Now, there's some things of which we have no control. If you leave this seminar this afternoon and by only the grace of the good Spirit or the Holy Spirit, your phone rings and you can actually talk to somebody here. You know what I mean? If that happens here, it's a blessing of the Lord. But you get this phone call and you're able to talk to somebody, and somebody very close to you has been killed in a car accident. How much control do you have? No control. We all have situations where we have very little control. But the truth is, most of the situations in our life, we have some control. And we need to take control when we need to take control. All right? So awareness, balance, and control. You need to be aware, you need to find your balance, and you need to take control where you have control. We're going to come back around and through those a number of times through this afternoon as we go along. Now, before we go on, I want us to talk a little bit about some of the major modern stressors. Now, there are some stressors that we live with that are not new. You know, 2,000 years ago, the stresses of a new baby in the family were just about the same. Parents went through the same thing. No sleep for who knows how long, you know the thing, you know the process. Hasn't changed much. Teenagers. I mean, that's 7 years of darkness that everybody has to go through. Hasn't changed a whole lot. Now, it's more dangerous for teenagers today. There's dangers today that are new, but the process of surviving it is really not that new. And parents and teenagers, I mean, it hasn't changed a whole lot. But there are a bunch of new stressors, and some of these we've adapted to a bit because they're not as new as they used to be. For instance, information overload. You know, I can remember I first started doing seminars, I think back in the 90s somewhere. Knowledge was doubling, every couple of 3 days. Dave, you remember that? Wasn't it 2 or 3 days back then? Or was it even then? 18 months. And then, it keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. I don't know, probably doubles now twice every day. I have no idea. I haven't checked out that statistic, right? And now we carry around these little gadgets that give us access to all that information whenever you want it, except at Pugwash. And Hope. Any of you been out at a Hope Camp Meeting in BC? It's just about the same. It's something to do where we plant these camps, I think. But here's the good news. Don't miss this. This is the good news. 99.99999% of all this information you don't need to know. Think about that. You just got to figure out what is it you need to know. And I can tell you there's a lot of stuff you're fooling around on here you don't need to know. Right? So that's the good news. So information over, and this AI stuff that's coming, I don't know if I can take it much longer. The other day, I like speaking my texts and stuff, I just can't write it off. I mean, they've always been realigning the spelling and stuff. But the other day, I dictated something in there, went back and read it, and suddenly the thing changes, whole new thought. Wasn't even what I wanted to say. I'm blaming AI. I don't know whether it was them or not, but... What's that? Yeah, modernize. I don't know how you do that. I'm getting to the point, there's a lot of things I don't want to know anymore. But anyway, I'm getting lazier and lazier. Information overload. Then constant change. The speed of change. By the way, how many of you have noticed that life is moving faster today than it did a year ago? Anybody notice that? It's not a figment of your imagination. Life is changing very rapidly. And it's been doing it for a while. And some of us have got so built up with change, right, that we're almost hardened to it. But we don't like to change. You know that? You don't like to change? No. You don't like to change. We are creatures of habit. We like to get in our nice little grooves and stay there. But we get bounced out all the time. And of course, the older we get, the less we like to change. And but all that change, and it's global now. It's not just you that's changing, it's global things that are changing. I mean, just within the last year or so, even the way they fight these wars, right? I mean, they do it with drones now, right? I know what a drone is, but I don't know how in the world they fight these things. But I mean, it's getting crazier and crazier, but change is happening very fast. Then there's unrelenting decisional overload, right? You go to check your email and 5 people will jump on there with some ad trying to get you to do something. Isn't that right? Unrelenting decisional overload. It's just constant. It's just chronic. Then, we already mentioned techno-stress. But the distractions today, you got to be very careful about the distractions. The distractions on your phone, the distractions on your computer, just the distractions of life. They're just everywhere. And we need to be aware of it, and it can distract us from what we really need to be thinking and doing. Now, coming out of COVID, isolation and loneliness were major factors. It still is. And anyway, we can't get into this one much here today, but you need to look and see whether you're isolating yourself. We're going to talk in a little bit about a support system, right? But you have to take initiative to prevent loneliness and isolation, and it's not that easy. And then there's the combination of several of them. They're actually doing some study now in the stress research area of the effects of 2 or 3 of these different stressors. And so, you know, these are just plain modern stressors that are relatively new and increasing all the time. And we need to be aware of them, okay? Now, we're going to do these couple little assessments. Now, you have your handout there. I want to tell you about this, and then we're just going to stop for about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to stop talking. You guys are going to work. And what we're going to do, and you've been very nicely sitting there faithfully for, oh, by the way, I should say, if you have a question, we're getting to be a bit too big a group for this much, but if you have a question or a comment, just jump up, stand on the chair, wave your arms, and we'll deal with it. Or just talk to me after, but I just keep going, right? And if you don't, just really get my attention. So find page 2, the stress test. Now, let me tell you how to do this, and then we're going to do it. So it only takes about 2 or 3 minutes to do this, but you go down through these and you check off the best answer for you in the last 30 days. Do not go back to a crisis 6 months ago. And do not anticipate a crisis that's going to happen in the fall, all right? But go back 30 days, all right? And choose the best of those answers. And then when you finish that, then add up your score, okay? And you can write in your score there, and then we're going to talk about your score after everyone's had a chance to do this. Now, by the way, for those of you online, I should have mentioned this earlier, and you could have went and got this, but I forgot. The conference is on the BC Conference website under Camp Meeting 2025. There's a PDF of this handout. So you're welcome to get that and also do this, okay? Now, you might have to print it from online, but at least you can see what we're talking about and then do it later. So anyway, so you do the stress test, okay? Any questions on the stress test? All right, so let's do it. I'm just going to stop talking for 2 or 3 minutes. We see how you do. Julie, there's a couple folks just come in. Maybe you want to just come right up and pick up a handout up here, and there's a pen up here. If you wanted to get one, just come and help yourself. Test? Okay, no rush. Few folks have, not very many. No rush.
If you could have $1 million or a case of poison ivy, you'd choose the money. A suitcase full of gems or a speeding ticket? Obvious. But what would you trade for God's word? Proverbs 8:10 says, "Receive my instruction and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold." Oh, God's not denigrating wealth, but he's saying his instruction is so precious that it's preferable to gold or silver. But people trade God's word for Facebook and doing homework and walking the dog and reading the news and TV and all sorts of stuff. This isn't hyperbole on the part of God. He's saying what you receive in the Bible is so valuable, so important, you shouldn't even trade it for gold or silver. So why trade it so easily for nothing? Treat God's word with the importance it deserves. Nothing else matters nearly as much. I'm John Bradshaw for It Is Written.
For those of you that have finished the stress test, go to the next page, and down at the bottom, you'll see that little box that says stress warning signals. Just go down through there and check off any of those that you are currently experiencing that are unusual for you. In other words, if normally you don't have any headaches, but now you're having headaches. Now, if you're someone that, you just have headaches all the time anyway, that's not unusual, right? But if it's unusual for you, normally you're sleeping every night, now you're not sleeping very good. That's unusual for you. Or maybe you never sleep very good, but now you can sleep all night, all day, all week. Things that are unusual, okay? All right, so do that, and in a minute we're going to talk about both of these. So let's talk about the stress test. Now, if you haven't finished the stress warning signals, just stop and you can finish that up as we talk about it, because it's pretty simple. But I do want to talk to you a bit about the stress test. So you all checked it off. You all have a score, right? So who of you here got a score from 76 to 110, somewhere in that range? How many? Okay, there's several. That's good. I would expect that here. Now, who have a score between 56 and 75? Anybody? Okay, yeah, several folks. That's a very popular area. Who has, did anybody get a score between 41 and 55? Yeah, there's a few. Now, I'm not going to ask for hands, but I'll bet there's some of you got a score under 40. Anybody comfortable raising your hand? I just know some of you got it, right? Okay, thanks. I knew there'd be some. In a group this size, you have somebody in every one of these areas. It's just the way it works, right? Now, here's the important thing about if your score is below 56. So if your score was above 56, but close to 56, you're probably experiencing some stress, right? But if it's up above 70, it's very manageable, right? If your score is below 56, you need to figure out, is it short-term or long-term stress? Now, here's what I mean by short-term stress. Short-term stress is maybe you're just at a time when a whole bunch of things have hit you at once. There's extra work at work. Maybe somebody in your family got sick, or somebody in your family has died, or who knows what happens, right? But it's short-term stress. Even if you've lost a loved one, or you've had some major loss of some kind, most of the time that's short-term stress. It may take you a year or two to recover and heal and all the rest of it, but it's still short-term stress. Here's what I mean by long-term chronic stress. Long-term chronic stress, let's suppose you got a score of 40, and you think back 2 to 3 years, and you think, if I'd have done that stress test 3 years ago, I'd have got 40 or less. Then that could be long-term chronic stress. In other words, there's some chronic stressors in there that either you haven't resolved or they're just there, right? Maybe this is a good place for me to tell you a story. I was doing a seminar in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Now, in Saskatchewan, when I was doing a lot of seminars, I did a lot of seminars in Saskatchewan. I don't know, I probably did a seminar with half of the Adventist churches there, but I think just about all of the health districts there and the schools, public schools, you name it, I've done a lot of seminars there. But in Moose Jaw, I came there and we did a community seminar. When I do this seminar with churches, it's usually done as a community thing, and if it's possible, it's always better to do that in a non-church setting, because most of the folks that will come to a church stress seminar are very busy people that may not be all that. Churches scare them, right? So we were doing this at a community college, and we had about 50 people in this class. 5 years later, I'm back there, different pastor, but the same church doing the same seminar at the same community college in the same room with just about the same size group. Well, when we stopped for the break, this lady comes up to me and she says, "You won't remember me, but 5 years ago you saved my life." Now, it always feels good when somebody tells you something nice like that. And I said, "Well, how did that happen?" She said, 5 years ago, right in this room, I was here when you did this. That's not me, is it? I hope not. In this same room, you did this same seminar, and I was here as a single parent, and I had a job that I detested. I hated that job, and I had the boss from hell. And when we went through the burnout thing, I was in the advanced stages of burnout on top of it. And she said, while I was here that day, you gave me the skills, and I decided that I'm going to fire that boss. And I decided right there I was going back to school. I was going to retrain. I was going to find another job. She actually had the process nicely in place. She was going to go back and retrain as a single parent working full-time in burnout. And she was going to find the job she wanted, and then she was going to fire the boss. Unfortunately, many folks, when they're in serious burnout, fire the boss before they figure out what they're going to do. And that creates more stress. So 5 years later, she comes back and she says, you know, I did the retraining. I have a job I just love. And I fired that boss. And I have healed from burnout. I am enjoying life. That's the goal. All right? And so even if your score is not good, and even though as we go through the stages of burnout in a little bit, you find yourself in trouble, there is hope. All right? You can heal, you can recover, you can enjoy life. Now, if you have folks and you want to share this, I have used this stress test in literally thousands of people, and it was well tested long before I ever started to use it. And fortunately, in your little handout, it has an explanation you can share with your friends that might do this thing that needs some help. Now, let's talk about stress warning signals. Now, if you haven't had a chance to do the stress warning thing, just as I talk about it, you can do it. Because what you do here is you basically, under the physical signals, you check out off any of those physical symptoms that you might be experiencing that are unusual for you. And then you look at the behavioral signals. You know, inability to get things done. You know, there are some very high performance people, and they get into some of the advanced stages of burnout, and man, what they normally could do in the morning takes them a week. Right? That's a stress warning signal. And then the emotional signals. You know, unhappiness for no reason. Is this the one where it talks about, no, it's the next one under cognitive, right? Loss of your sense of humor. Thoughts of running away. I was in one seminar, and we're going through this thing, well, maybe I should just tell you something and then I'll tell you the story. How many of you checked off 3 or 4 of these stress warning signals? Anybody have 2? Just raise your hand so I can see. Yeah, we've got a bunch of folks with at least 2. Anybody have 5? Anybody have 10 or more? I've had folks check off half of them. Here's the good news. Whether you checked off 1 or 2, or you checked off 25, once you get the stress under control, they all disappear. The reason some of you only checked off 1 or 2, and somebody else checks off 25, maybe with an equal score on the stress test, is because our bodies are all different, right? And so one person might be affected with 1 or 2 things, and another person affects them a whole bunch of ways, right? So back to the story. So we finished all this, and we've gone through this. I just shared with what I just shared, and this lady raises her hand, and she says, and she didn't say it real nice. She said, you know, I only checked off 1. Do you think it's significant? I said, well, what did you check off? She said, thoughts of running away. I said, it could be very significant, right? It's not how many, it's how significant they are, right? Yeah. And so in a way, this just gives you a little snapshot. You do this a month from now, you might get a completely different score, good or bad, right? And you can do it a number of times. I have used it so many times that when I was still doing a lot of stress seminars, I would go back to some organization And somebody, I'd be in their office and they pull out the drawer and said, here's the stress test. I do this every 6 months. Yeah, kind of as a monitor. But anyway, that's just a tool that we're giving you. Now, just so seeing we got you worked up and you need to get a little perspective, a couple of things I want to share with you now to get you a little perspective. There's always a worst case. Yeah, you think there's stress in your life. And then there's this one. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, listen, pal, I work 2 jobs. I got the shaft in a divorce. My car's making a weird noise. My kid dyed his mohawk pink, and my dog had a litter in my living room. So don't tell me I have one item too many unless you have a death wish. I shared that with one group, and a lady who was a checker at one of the stores said that, that really happens. Question? Oh, yeah, okay, sure. This one. Oh, he wants to get a picture. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to take a break in about 6 minutes. And, but I think we should start on this. The core of this seminar are the 8 ways to manage stress. And coming back to what we're focusing on a little bit in our preparation for living through this final crisis. You need resilience. You need to be able to learn how to bounce with whatever happens. And that's the key. And so we're going to share with you a little bit how to do that, okay? And we need to learn how to relax and enjoy the process. And we're talking about everything other than righteousness. Christ our righteousness. If you're trying to be righteous, you're not going to make it. You receive that as a gift. And the speaker last night hit it straight on, right? There's only one way to get the blessing back. And that's how. The Lord does it. The Lord recreates us, gives us a new nature, right? Gives us His righteousness. There's a lot of Catholic theology among us. You know that, right? You know what Catholic theology is regarding righteousness? Oh, I tell you, I heard this a lot as a kid. What is it? I do my best. He makes up the rest. You ever heard that in Adventist circles? That's really good Catholic theology. When it comes to righteousness, my best is still not very good. Wasn't it Jeremiah said? God said through Jeremiah, your righteousness as what? Now, he was talking to some rascals. This was some of the Israeli leaders at the time, and they were rascals. But he knew his righteousness wasn't that great either, right? And so when you're talking about righteousness, and we're talking about Christ our righteousness, and as we go through these principles will help you manage stress in these difficult times in which we live and which we're going to live through. And I tell you, I really believe we're close enough that some of us are going to live through it. Oh, I should tell you this little story. When I was at Southern, my senior year, C.D. Brooks. Anybody listen to C.D. Brooks much, the old black guy? Yeah. Man, I tell you, that guy could preach. And but he came to Southern. Now, Southern back in '71 was all white. We didn't even have anybody with a little color. This was a deep South in the 70s. I had just come from Atlantic Union College where it was 50-50, right? And C.D. Brooks shows up to do the week of prayer. And he shook the place up a little bit. Kind of fun to watch it happen. That's what I like to watch, some of that stuff happen. But what really, one night he's preaching away, and he's on the exit from the Red Sea, right? And he's talking about when the waters opened. And he says, you know, there were mothers with little children there. And they weren't moving very fast. And there were some old folks there with their canes. They weren't going very fast. And of course, the Egyptian army was just on the shore there, kind of had their wheels locked by the Holy Spirit, but they were right there. And then he said, you know, word went out. Take your time. There's no rush. Nobody's going to get you. Remember that. Who knows what you're going to have to deal with between now and the time the Lord breaks the heavens. But nobody's going to get you. You believe that? We don't have to be terrified. Maybe I should just say something else about here before we get into this stuff. But, you know, we talk about Jacob's trouble, right? We have this time of some kind of trouble. Yeah, Jacob didn't have to have a time of trouble. There are some of the saints going to have a Jacob's trouble. Jacob didn't have to have that time of trouble. Before he left to go home, an angel showed up and said, Jacob, don't worry about it. We got you covered. You're going to make it there safely. Remember that? And he gets down there and gets a report his brother's coming with an army. His brother had a good reason to give him a good kick in the butt. Right? And he panics. And the reason he wrestled with the Lord that night, he was panicked. Do you notice Daniel with any panic? I don't see any panic in Daniel. I don't see any panic in those three Hebrews. I'd like to know where Daniel was when they were down there. Again, I like to use my imagination. You know, I think Daniel probably went in to see the king. Daniel was the closest confidant of the king. I think he went in and he said, King, are you done with me or what? Because if I show up down there, you're going to throw me in the fire. And the king knew Daniel well enough to know that if he's down there, he's going to go in the fire. And Daniel was so valuable to Nebuchadnezzar, I think he sent him on a trip. I don't know. Maybe he said, take the day off. I don't know what it was, but if Daniel would have been down there, there'd have been 4 in the fire. And then when the Lord came, there'd have been 5, right? I don't see any panic in those folks. You know, Daniel, you know, he's 87 or 88 or something when they throw him into the lions. You ever seen that picture? I don't know whether it's in the Bible stories or where it is, but I see this picture and Daniel's leaning up against the wall, scared to death. I don't think so. I mean, he's an old man. Those old dungeons where they put those lions was cold and wet and damp. They got a couple of old folks down here. I mean, you want to be down in there? You want to curl up with those cats. I think one of those things crawled over there and kept him warm through the night, right? But Jacob panicked because Jacob had a hard time trusting the Lord. And I want to tell you, folks that have had a hard time trusting the Lord, they're going to get through to the kingdom, but they're going to have a harder time. And the time we have right now is to learn to trust Him that He can take care of us. And experiences like the brother this morning with the devotional shared is what strengthens us to know that He's there no matter what, right? Anyway, I way off my topic. But anyway, we need to learn how to relax and enjoy the process. And I've taken up all my time. It's 3 o'clock. You need a good break. Let's take 15, 20 minutes. We come back. We're going to look at the 8 ways to cool off the soup. We're going to look at the stages to burn out. And we'll do a little exercise, and then you can go for supper. All right. Take a break. I want everybody to go for a walk, get some fresh air. If you want, I'm going to be around here. If you have a question, you want to come and chat. But everybody got to get their blood circulating, right? I want you with me the rest of the time. And by the way, I am impressed. I haven't saw anybody have a nap. Usually at 2 o'clock, somebody's having a nap. I mean, you guys, maybe somebody did and you did it very nicely. Anyway, let's get some circulation going and come back at about 20 after. We're going to start.
It only takes a spark to get a fire going, and soon all those around can warm up in its glowing. That's how it is with God's love. Once you've experienced it, you spread His love to everyone you want to pass it on. What a wondrous time is spring, when all the trees are budding. The birds begin to sing, the flowers start their blooming. That's how it is with God's love. Once you've experienced it, you want to sing. It's fresh like spring. You want to pass it on. I wish for you, my friend, this happiness that I found. You can depend on Him. It matters not where you're bound. I'll shout it from the mountaintop. I want my world to know the Lord of love has come to me. I want to pass it on. I'll shout it from the mountaintop. I want my world to know the Lord of love has come to me. I want to pass it on. Sorry, it sounds like I'm gonna be like, sorry about that. How long has it been since you talked with the Lord and told Him your heart's hidden secrets? How long since you prayed? How long since you stayed since you walked with the dawn and felt that the days worth the living? Can you call him your friend? How long has it been since you knew that he cared for you? Jesus right here in my heart. I'm alive and living, all because I'm forgiven. I got Jesus right here in my heart. Now if you want real joy within your life, you want to be free from care and strife, then give your heart to Him today. He'll show you the only way to be rich and free and so completely happy. You have Jesus right here in your heart. Come along with me, let's tell the world why we're happy. We got Jesus right here in our heart. Let's sing. Let's sing and shout. An idea. Let's tell them what it's all about. We got Jesus right here in our hearts. And if you want real joy and peace of mind, it won't be long till they will find that Jesus is the only way to find real happiness today. They'll be rich and free and so completely happy. They'll have Jesus right here in their hearts. They'll have Jesus right here in their hearts. I got Jesus right here in my heart. You lads are just on the same page.
That's it.
Yes, Jeremy will be so proud. And then it goes. You'll hear the harmonies. Here we go. I must tell Jesus all of my trials. I cannot bear these burdens alone. In my distress, He kindly will help me. He ever loves and cares for His own. I must tell Jesus, I must tell Jesus, I cannot bear my burdens alone. I must tell Jesus, I must tell Jesus, Jesus can help me, Jesus alone. I must tell Jesus all of my troubles. He is a kind, compassionate friend. If I might ask Him, He will deliver. Make all my troubles, daily and end. I must tell Jesus, I must tell Jesus, I cannot bear my burdens alone. I must tell Jesus, I must tell Jesus, Jesus can help me, Jesus alone. Oh, how the world to
Okay, everybody got a good stretch. Got some
oh, how my
light
heart is
stretch. Yeah,
tempted
they're all
to
relaxed.
sing.
Good.
I must tell Jesus.
Just before we jump into this, just a reminder to those that are watching online that the handout that we're using is available on the Maritime website under Camp Pugwash or Camp Meeting 25 or something there. Anyway, you should be able to find it. Anyway, you can have access to it, and we can always get you some of those answers if you can't fill that all in. Okay. Here's what I want you to imagine now. Imagine a bowl of your favorite soup, but it's too hot. and you're hungry, you have a number of ways of cooling it off, right? And so we're going to go through those. Now, the favorite way to cool it off is just throw in some ice, do it real fast. Some folks have to do it that way, and you'll notice that when we go through this. And then there's some others that'll just let it sit, and there's different ways of cooling it off. So we're going to go through those ways and apply it to cooling off your stress. Okay, so it's kind of the metaphor that we're using here. Now, the other thing that I again want to mention the book, because you're going to notice, especially in your handout, that under each one of these 8 ways, there's at least one chapter. With some of them, there's 2 or 3 chapters that expand this. Now, just to give you the little history of this book, we originally published this sometime in, 2000, 2001. We self-published it a couple of times, and it had a green cover. By the way, if anybody here been, a couple of folks came up and they've been at this seminar, and I've been somewhere. Anybody heard of me around, been to this before? Oh, there's a few. At Silver Hill? Oh, you were, okay, up at Silver Hills. But then about 2010, 2012, Signs Publishing in Australia republished, well, they took it on. And their colporteur, the South Pacific Division, have a very strong publishing program. And also we have one on teen stress, and I don't have a copy of it here. They have it over at the ABC. But this came out just as COVID hit. And so it kind of got some limited circulation right then. But they have lots of this one over at the ABC. You might want to get one for you, somebody in your family you know that's stressed. If you've got teenagers, whether you have your own teenagers or you have grandparents and have teenagers, you might want to look at the cooling down teen stress. You know, it's interesting. My daughter wrote the storyline. She was 19. Well, that was somewhere around right around the turn of the century there somewhere. And both of them are in story format. And the teen one is, teens relate very well to that story that she put together. And so if you have teenagers or they have some also there at ABC. Okay, so let's jump in. The first way you can cool off the soup is you simply let it sit. If that soup's too hot, you can just let it sit for a little while. Now, there's some of you can't do that. I don't know how much you know about the temperaments, but if you're highly choleric, you're not going to let it sit. Why? Takes too long, right? So you're going to dump in some cold water, some cold milk, or ice cubes or something so you can cool that thing off and eat it, right? In fact, the folks that would do that may be the ones that need to really listen to these points, because they're burning up a lot of extra energy. Now, these next 4 or 5 things that we're going to bring up here are actually kind of examples of some things that are in that chapter in the book that we get in a little more detail with than I can here. And some of these 8 things we're going to jump over pretty quick. There's a couple of them we're going to settle into and spend some time with, okay? This one I want to spend a little bit of time with because I want it as an example and kind of as a model of the different things that are here. Now, there is what we call the stress response. The stress response you have a number of times in any given day. Every time something happens, you have a stress response. You know, you get a phone call. Somebody's upset with you about something. You have a stress response. right? You stub your toe and almost fall down. You have a stress response, right? We have it dozens of times in any given day. Many times we waste a lot of energy on stress responses, and we need to learn how to control that stress response. And so there's a number of ways here that you can do that. So you can call a timeout. You press the pause button. Do you have a pause button? I have a really good pause button now. I didn't used to have one, right? And some of you don't have a pause button. Pause button means that you just stop, you back off, you analyze the situation a little bit before you jump into it and get all worked up about it. There's some folks that, man, it don't take much to get them worked up about anything. And they're wasting an awful lot of energy. So you can call a timeout. You hit the pause button. You take 3 deep breaths. Now, I don't have time to take, when we used to do these seminars for 6 hours, we'd take 10 minutes and kind of make sure everybody know how to do this. But if you just take a deep breath, not hold your breath, but just breathe in through your nose and get lots of oxygen there and your lungs expand, it relaxes you. It is amazing how that does. And so that is just a very physical thing that will trigger the relaxation response. Another thing you can do is that you analyze the situation and you talk positively to yourself. Now, do you talk to yourself? It's okay. There's a book. Oh, it's an old book now. It's got to be been out for 20 years. How to talk to yourself. So it's okay if you're talking positively. We all talk to ourselves some ways. Some out loud. You got to be careful if you do it out loud if you're around some people. They might think some things that is true is not true. But you analyze the situation and you talk positively. Now, you're a very spiritual group. And you're going to pray, you're going to talk to the Lord about it, and that's all good. But I've done most of these seminars with folks that I couldn't suggest that. And it is a fact, whether you're a spiritual person or not, if you say, you bump into some crisis, and if you say, I can handle this, your body relaxes. It's just amazing. We just have some advantages, as Christians, and knowing that we can rely on the Lord. I mean, we just have some wonderful advantages that sometimes the average folks just don't have. But then you ask the question, what difference will it make? This thing has happened. What difference is it going to make next year? Your teenage kid comes home from the mall with a garment you cannot imagine them wearing. How significant is that going to be a year from now? Especially if you tell him how good he looks in it. Dad likes it. Got to get rid of that. I mean, sometimes we got to think things through and use a little better psychology, right? So you get, you think it through a little bit. What difference is it going to make? I want to back up to number 3. I forgot something. What can I ask yourself? What can I do about this? What if there's nothing you can do about it? You just got to deal with it. But what if there is something you can do about it? Then you need to do it. You'd be surprised how much stress we carry around because we don't do what we could do to solve it. All right? So that's dealing with that. Now, the final one here is a very important one for Christians, particularly Adventists. Beware of perfectionism. Now, there's nothing wrong with working with excellence. And there is a huge difference between working with excellence and perfectionism. Some people try so hard to have all their ducks in the row just right that they create all kinds of unnecessary stress, not only for themselves, but everybody else around them, right? And sometimes you need to cut yourself a little slack. Sometimes you need to cut some other people a little slack. I want to tell you, the good Lord is very gracious with us, so we can be gracious with others, right? But perfectionism, you know, I think of one of the worst cases I have ever seen of burnout was a very young woman. I don't know if she was 24, in Vancouver, a naturopath. She had just graduated from naturopath school, and she was beyond the chart on burnout because primarily of perfectionism. She had driven herself so hard through university and the extra training that when she finally realized what was happening, and she had to take a couple years off work, and then she only went back half-time for work for probably 5 years before she went back, actually could work full-time. Somebody mentioned Silver Hills here, and some of you folks here in the Maritimes might not understand, but Silver Hills is a lifestyle center run by a couple of wonderful Adventists out there. And she went there 3 or 4 times. She told me not too long ago that she actually she had pushed herself so hard she'd actually damaged her adrenal glands, and it had taken a long time to heal. But it was because she just drove herself so hard, right? So you can see why I put the emphasis on let's relax, right? And we can. So let's go to the next one. Let's the soup sit. The next one is, there we go, thin the soup. See, when you dump in some cold water or some cold milk or throw in some ice cubes, what are you doing? You're thinning the soup, right? And thinning the soup with stress means that you're diluting it. And there's a couple of ways that are powerful when it comes to thinning the stress soup. And the first one is to learn to relax. You've heard me say it a dozen times already. Now, what you need to understand is the difference between the stress response and the relaxation response. Now, we've talked a bit about the stress response. Stress response is automatic. You don't have to think about it. You just have the stress response. The relaxation response is not, it is voluntary. Voluntary. That means you do not automatically relax. Just because it's the end of the day, it doesn't mean you relax. Just because the job is finished. Most of the time, we have to consciously relax. And again, I don't have the time in this little seminar to teach you really how to relax, but I want to tell you there's some good information online. There's some books that it's not complicated, but sometimes you need to deliberately learn how to unwind. And there's some people that have to work on that a whole lot harder than others. But you need to recognize that the relaxation response is voluntary. For instance, anybody had the experience, maybe you come home after work or you've had some big project or something and you decide, I'm going to go for a walk. And after you're walking for 10 or 15 minutes, suddenly you relax. You know what happened? You triggered the relaxation response. And there's a number of things that will trigger the relaxation response. You need to find what it is that triggers that for you, and there can be a number of different things. So relaxation thins the stress. The other one is develop a strong personal support system. And again, I wish we could spend a little bit more time on this one, but what this means is that you have a group of friends around you, other than your spouse. You need some good friends other than your spouse. Why? What if you're both going through the same crisis? You know, your grandkid was ran over by a truck or something, right? Or your kid. You're not a whole lot of help to each other. You need somebody to lean on, right? But you realize that most people don't have anybody. And if you don't, you need to look around and find some friends. Now, my oldest daughter just was with us last week. She hadn't been back here to the Maritimes for quite a while, and her husband and kids had never been to the Maritimes, so they came up and they had a grand time last week with Grandma, and I'm here at the camp. But her and her husband have a marvelous gift of making friends. I don't know a couple that has more couple friends than these two, right? But my daughter is an outgoing character. She just connects with people very well. She's an emergency nurse down in Chattanooga. Just to give you an example, her best friend today, I think it was both of them their senior year. The friend is not a nurse, but they met at some college event, and she decided this girl would make a good friend. Neither one of them were married at the time. But if she decided this is going to be a good friend, I know exactly what the next step is. She will take the initiative. They will get together and either have a hot drink, or they'll have lunch, or they'll do something. And now they're both married, and their spouses are good friends, and they get together all the time, right? I remember one time she was at work, and this new nurse in the emergency room shows up, just moved into town. I don't think this girl was even a Christian. And Delight says, I think she'd be a good friend. I think I'm going to take her out for lunch. Does this all the time. Anything wrong with that? You may have to target somebody. Don't tell them you're targeting them. Just do it, right? But, you know, relationships don't happen automatically, do they? You don't automatically have a good relationship with your kids. You don't automatically have a good relationship with your spouse. Do you? No. And so you find some people that, now the thing is, good friends can lean on each other. I mean, there's some people that might want to lean on you, but they're never going to be a good friend. I mean, you can be helpful to them to a point, but we're talking about folks where you mutually can help each other, right? And so you can look at that. It's okay. The third one, we're not going to spend a lot of time on part of this, stirring the soup. This is physical activity, sometimes called exercise. I'm going to assume you know enough about this one. There is no question that regular physical activity helps you manage stress. Now, we're not talking about what Mark Twain suggested. He said that whenever he got the urge to exercise, he would lie down until the feeling passed. That's not going to help. But that's all I'm going to say about physical activity. I'm just going to assume you know it. If you do not know it, you can find that information. Adventists, we have promoted that for, we're doing fine. The next one here, though, we do need to talk about. Get adequate, what's the word? Rest. You know, it's amazing. I have done seminars with an awful lot of groups, tired groups. I mean, most of the stress seminars I do, well, used to do, I don't do very many anymore, but the ones People come tired. I mean, they're just plain tired. But you know where the tiredest ones are? Sabbath morning, 11 o'clock, in an Adventist church. It's amazing how tired we are. And we have the Sabbath. Just think how tired the rest of the folks are, right? By the way, and I guess the Holy Spirit knew I didn't need to say this because I didn't see anybody having a nap. But usually in afternoon seminars, I will tell folks, you get afternoon, sometimes you get sleepy, and I just tell folks, just go ahead, have a nap. As long as you don't make any noise, we won't wake you up. And usually there's a few folks have a little nap. But I was at the Windsor Church, Windsor, Ontario churches, a number of years ago, and I was there to do a stress seminar like this, but I think it was going to be on a Sunday afternoon. And so I had the message that day. It was kind of a health thing. And so I was talking about rest, and I mentioned, it's okay to take a little cat nap wherever you need it. And then I said, even in church. Well, on the way out, there's this young fella, maybe 25, couple little kids. He said, Pastor, I just kind of woke up when I heard you say that it's okay to have a little nap. I don't have a clue what you said the first half, but the second half was pretty good. So I want you alert. So if it takes 10-minute nap, that's fine. But now it's after 4. You're not going to nap now. Because my wife would say, you can't nap after 4 because you're going to ruin your sleep. Now, I'm just happen to be one of those folks. I can have a nap at 5, and I'm still good at 10. But she's not. Poor napper. I'm a good napper. Any good nappers here? Yeah, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Man, I'm raring to go, right? Now, my wife, not a good napper. She has 10 or 15-minute nap. Man, she feels miserable afterwards, right? Unless she didn't get much sleep the night before. But if she's had a normal, she don't nap. But, I was born tired, and I have to have some naps. So anyway, you need to get adequate rest. That's my point here. If you're going to manage your stress, you need to get adequate rest. You need daily, most of us, 7 to 10 hours a night. Weekly, a day of rest. What's the Sabbath commandment say? Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. What's it say after that? 6 days, do your work, and what? Yeah, but doesn't it say rest in there somewhere? Pardon? What am I missing? Is it somebody's? Yeah. That's rest, isn't it? It's amazing we get so busy on Sabbath. Some churches are so busy on Sabbath, make me tired. Now, other ones need to get moving, But you need some weekly rest. We have Sabbath, and yet we still don't rest. I don't know what the deal is. But yearly, you need a restful, restorative vacation. And in a group this side, somebody is saying, which planet are you from? But who decides? Who decides if you get enough rest? You decide. All right. Oh, play with the soup. Now I have a very serious question. And this is a serious question. I'm being very serious. And you do not need to respond to this. But this is probably the most important question I'm going to ask you today. And I'm being very serious. Are you enjoying life? You don't need to answer. Are you enjoying life? If not, why not? If not, you need to find out why not. Life is too short not to enjoy the process. Life is very short. And if you're not enjoying it, you need to figure out why not. What's one of the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace. Yeah. But there are things that can destroy the joy. Even the Holy Spirit can't get through. right? I mean, if there's a blockage, you need to find out what's the blockage and get rid of it, okay? Now, humor is a powerful stress buffer. I want to tell you, if you're uptight and you have a good belly laugh, I want to tell you, you trigger the relaxation response. And what we suggest is you create a humor survival kit. And of course, today, you could have a nice little series of the video clips, the ones that are always funny. Some are funny the first time, but not the second time. I mean, you have a collection of the ones that are always funny. There's some that are just always funny. There are some stories that are just always funny. And so you have a little collection. And if you're having a particularly difficult day, you've gone for the walk, you've done the deep breathing, you've done all this stuff, and you're still too uptight, then you need a few funny stories. Humor is a powerful stress buffer. I'm going to try a couple on you. It's late in the afternoon. But let me try a couple. I have told this hundreds of times. It's in a groove in my brain, all right? And what's interesting is the first one, I've had to adapt it. Society is so sensitive. It was a whole lot more funny originally, right? But it's still funny, right? But did you hear about the little boy? He goes to the bank with his dad, and they're in the line to get to the teller. And in front of them is this very tall, just very big man. And as he finishes up and he's collecting his papers, a beeper goes off, either on his belt or on his phone or something. This beeper goes off, beeping away. And the little guy says, "Watch out, Dad, he's backing up." Then have you heard of the little girl? Goes to her grandma one day, says, "Grandma, how old are you?" Grandma says, "That's not a good question. You don't ask grandmas how old they are." So she says, "Grandma, how much do you weigh?" Not a good question either. So the little girl goes away and playing for a while. She comes back and she says, "Grandma, I know how old you are and how much you weigh. You are 65 years old and you weigh 125 pounds. And Grandma says, "How did you figure that out?" She says, "Well, I was digging around in your purse and I found your driver's license. And I also discovered that you got an F in sex." I'm not sure I should have done that in church, but in a way, find some funny stories, right? Find some funny stories. Okay. Again, I'm not going to talk much about this one. This is nutrition. Man, if there's one topic Adventists have killed, is nutrition. I mean, if we talk about nothing else, we talk about food, right? And you need to eat good food. I'm not, we need to eat good food. But we put so much emphasis on food that we forget that we need to exercise and a few other things, right? I like what Dr. Scharfenberg, he has this nice little summary. He says, eat at the proper times, a variety of natural foods in quantities to maintain ideal weight. Isn't that a nice summary? You figure out what the natural foods are. You figure out the proper times, right? And there's all kinds of good books out there. You notice that this is under chapter 7. I haven't pointed this out. I think the humor one was at chapter 6. Can't quite see that from here. And so that's nutrition. You can figure that out. And if you can't, there's all kinds of Adventists to help you. Figure out the balance, and you'll be good. Now, I do want to spend some time on this one. Beware of poison in the soup. Beware of poison in your stress soup. And this, we're talking about deep-seated stress. So let's figure out what is deep-seated stress. Most of the time when we think about stress, we're thinking about superficial stress. Not enough time. You get the flu. Car breaks down. You know, that's all superficial stress. You know, our friend, as he was coming here, he shared the story. That was all superficial stress. And if you noticed, he bounced with it quite well. Right? He even came in here and preached a good sermon after it all. Right? Tied it all together. That was all superficial stress. Deep-seated stress are things like low self-worth, unresolved grief, guilt, unnatural fear and anxiety, hopelessness and depression, negative emotions, and negative attitudes. These are internal stressors. They aggravate all the regular stressors. Okay? And so we're going to look at a couple of these. Again, I think, no, maybe I don't even have it on there. Is it in your workbook? I don't think it's up there on my screen, but if you notice in your Beware of Poison in Your Stress, there's 5 chapters in the book on this. When we redid the book with Science Publishing, we added 4 chapters. And all those 4 chapters are all on deep-seated stress. So the last 4 chapters, plus a couple others, are dealing with deep-seated stress. So let's just touch on a couple. Oh, yes, I stressed her right out. She's got to go for a walk. No problem. Before we go to guilt, back to low self-esteem. For those of us that grew up with very low self-worth, I want to tell you, you have to resolve it. And I'm not going to get into that here. It's too big a topic for us. But there is some stuff it's on your value. And as Christians, there's nothing that gives us more value in the fact, except the fact that we were created in the image of God, right? And the other thing that fascinates me is our God is so creative. He created us all very different. I mean, when the Lord made you, He threw away the mold. You're one of a kind. And that makes you very valuable to Him, right? And being created in God's image. But even when we know all of that, if we grew up with low self-worth, you had to work on it. And the Lord will help you. But I want to talk, there's a couple here I just want to hit very quickly. Guilt. Guilt. Do you know there is both good guilt and bad guilt? I have learned there's a lot of Christians haven't figured that out. What is good guilt? You might know what good guilt is. What is it? Just speak. I'm sorry.
Makes you correct your behavior.
Okay, so it does make you correct your behavior, but why does it do it? See, good guilt is when you have done something wrong, right? That's what you're referring to, right? When you've done something wrong according to your value system, right? So what's the value system for Christians? Was it? The Bible, but let's get more specific. The 10 Commandments, right? If you sin, by the way, people think all kinds of things are sin. It's not sin unless it's breaking one of the commandments, right? You think about that. But good guilt is when you've done something wrong based on your value system. Because you ate your supper too late, or you ate the wrong thing, and you woke up in the morning, didn't sleep well, and you're cranky, and you're nasty to your spouse, and you're nasty to the kids, and finally at lunchtime you realize, I'm in line for the Grouch of the Month award. And in the process you realize you've hurt a whole bunch of people. and you feel guilty. How do you get rid of that guilt? You apologize. Repent sometimes is apologize, isn't it? Repenting is recognizing you messed up, right? And you make it right. Isn't that what good guilt does? It leads us to sort out relationships, right? And including our relationship with the Lord. Now, what is bad guilt? I'm going to tell you a lot of this around. What's bad guilt? Very good. She's got it. Bad guilt is where you're feeling guilty for somebody else's actions. Now, I want to tell you, there's folks that like to give you their guilt. And if you accept their guilt, how do you get rid of it? There's only one way. There's only one way to get rid of somebody else's guilt. You give it back to them. Because you can't deal with their guilt, right? And you know, as Christians, and particularly as Adventists, for some of us that grew up at certain times, I still remember the first time I went bowling at Kingsway College. The little church I grew up in, that was a sin. Yeah, she had the same thing. And so I go to Kingsway and they're going bowling. I think they went 3 times before I'd even think about going. Then when I finally went, was I experiencing good guilt or bad guilt? Yeah, I mean really, think it through.
It really actually depends on the acquisition of these campus.
Well, that wasn't the issue. We were just going with the whole crowd, right? There was a campus event. I mean, that was the worst thing. I mean, administration was for it. I mean, that can take a kid and you just get all worked up because now, what are they doing, right? We need to know the difference between good guilt and bad guilt, right? And sometimes we feel guilty about things, and the Holy Spirit has to get us sorted out. And so that's guilt. Negative emotions, anger, hostility, hatred, jealousy. There's a couple of really good chapters in the book that I borrowed most of it basically from a seminar on forgiveness. And forgiveness is a powerful stress management buffer. Now there is a place for anger. And there is a place sometimes even for some hatred. You might hate somebody for a good reason. And you may need to get some professional help to get beyond it. But sometimes you may need to forgive somebody who really hurt you, even though they will never recognize that they hurt you. And that you forgive them for whose benefit? Your benefit. There's some folks that I've had to forgive that will never recognize, for a variety of reasons, that they never did anything wrong. And I forgave them a long time ago. Because I'm not going to carry that junk around. Right? And so, if you can't do that, then you may need a good counselor to help you process some things so you can leave it behind. But negative emotions. Question? I hear the voice. Well, it is. Yeah, forgiveness, she's saying, is the key to survival. But sometimes we have to learn how to forgive. And I want to tell you, some of the times the pain is so intense, and there's some nasty things happen on this planet. I mean, humans do some terrible things to other humans. And sometimes to get to that forgiveness, You need some professional help, even as Christians, all right? I want to tell you, there's a lot of Christians who have buried some stuff that the Lord can't even help you with because it's buried so deep. And so don't be afraid to get some help if that's what you need. Unresolved grief. Can't talk about this one too much tonight, but we have, I think, a couple of chapters in the book dealing with this. But it is a very complicated, deep-seated stressor. And we go through grief not just at the loss of a loved one. You know, as we get older, we go through grief at the loss of abilities to do certain things, right? You know, you can't run quite as fast, right? Can't climb that mountain quite as fast, or a whole bunch of things, right? But I tell you, in BC, we see a lot of people going through a lot of grief when their house burns down because a fire came flying through, right? So unresolved grief, you don't just get over grief. You have to work your way through grief. And there are some good solutions. I'm just mentioning this because there is help, but we can't go through that here. Negative attitudes, pessimism, cynicism, criticism. Oh boy, don't we have lots of that around. You may need some healing from negative attitudes. I personally believe you need a little cynical streak. But don't be a cynic. I want to tell you, in the advanced stages of burnout, you look down the road to being a cynic. But I want to tell you, today especially, you got to question everything. And it's going to even be more so. It's going to be harder and harder to separate truth from error. But you don't have to be negative, right? You can choose to be positive and optimistic. And I want to tell you, Christians should be the most optimistic, positive people on the planet. I was sharing with one of the pastors, or I don't know whether I shared it with the whole group or not, because we did a little thing with the pastors on stress this last week. But, you know, when I switched, I pastored for 20 years, and then for 15 years I was out doing stress, mainly stress. I did some other wellness stuff in the business world, and then went back pastoring. But I want to tell you, when I first went out doing seminars, I was shocked at how negative our churches are. And what shocked me was how positive I found outside the church. Business groups, public school teachers, hospital folks, some of them very stressed, carrying huge loads. But more positive, the folks that believe they're on the way to the kingdom. Man, we're on the way to the new earth. And we have a Lord that takes care of it. We can relax. He don't make us uptight, right? The verse in Scripture that helped me the most in recovery from burnout was, "Come to me, all you who are weary and" what? Tired. My burden is light. If your burden is heavy, you and the Lord got to get together and sort it out. Because He's not putting it there. Somebody might be putting it there. Could be human, could be unhuman. But He's not doing it, right? I mean, if He does put a burden, that we use that word kind of loosely. I mean, He might challenge you to go do something you don't want to do. But if you're following Him, it's not a heavy deal, right? And so we can be positive, we can be optimistic. And if you can't be positive and optimistic, you need to find out why not and get over it. Now, you can't just get over it. You may need to get some help. And hopefully something here may even be helpful. All right. Okay, give thanks for the soup. Develop the attitude of gratitude. In other words, be thankful for the stress. Now, something I didn't mention way back at the beginning. Stress is the spice of life. Stress is not the problem. The only people that have no stress, guess where they are? They're dead. They have no stress. You want some stress. Stress is not the problem. The problem is too much unmanaged stress. That's the problem. And everything you do causes a little stress. You know what the most stressful thing is you do any day for your body? You know what the most stressful thing you do in any given day on your body? Digesting your breakfast, dinner, and supper. Did you know that? And yet you eat every day 3 times. A few of you 2 times. So stress isn't bad. Now, take a moment. I'm not going to stop and give you time to do this, but just as we go along, think about what's a couple of things you're thankful for. And write them in there. And you might want to do that exercise every day. You know. Now, the next little bit, I'm going to do something here that I usually don't do in this seminar because we are partly preparing for the end of time, right? We're in the time of the end. I don't know if you're looking forward to the end of time, but I'm looking forward to it. I had enough of this mess. I really have had enough. So develop and enjoy your walk with God. Man, he needs to be your best friend. And I hope he is. He wants to be your best friend. I just can't figure out how he can be best friend to all of us, but he can. Isn't that good news? He's there. And figure out how to live life with purpose and passion, set goals, set direction, consistent with your walk with him. And enjoy the peace of his presence. He says, my peace I give to you. Right? Not as the world gives, right? Then he says, don't let your heart be troubled. You're going to have trouble out here on the planet, but don't worry about it. I've taken care of it, right? Oh, man, that's the good news. And the thing is, and just to make sure we get the balance, the Lord doesn't do for us what we can do. If you have the ability to eat, he's not going to feed you. Right? If you have the ability to get some exercise, he's not going to make you do it. See, the Lord don't make us do anything. You understand that, right? He encourages you. He will challenge you. But in the end of the day, it's up to you. Right? So he won't do what you can't do. Now, if he takes you in a spot and you can't do it and you need a miracle, he'll give you the miracle. Isn't that good news? He does for us what we can't do. That's what a miracle is, right? And that's why this is a miracle. We have no righteousness. We have no hope of doing anything to get any. So he gives it to us. It's a miracle, right? It's a miracle. But he doesn't do what we can do. And that is different from that bad theology we talked about. Because that is talking about righteousness. Okay? That makes sense? You follow all that? You just listen to this guy at night. He got it straight. He's got it straight. Okay, where are we? All right. Okay, we're still on this one with giving thanks for stress. And this is, again, the spiritual. There's a book here I want to recommend. You know, we have some wonderful books as Adventists. The Adventist Book Center has some wonderful books, and they have some that are not even written by Adventists. When I was recovering from burnout, the first clergy stress seminar I ever did was in Newfoundland. And an Anglican pastor I just see Pastor Dave back there. It was in Lethbridge. And an Anglican priest, I did this little clergy thing. Whoever the pastor was then, and our pastor there at the time, had arranged this. And he introduced me to Oswald Chambers' book. Anybody familiar with Oswald Chambers' book, My Utmost for His Highest? I want to tell you, that book helped pull me out of burnout. And I still read it. What I appreciate about Chambers, he constantly drives me back to the Lord. Constantly. And I need that. Now, I love Spirit of Prophecy. I've read, it's just great stuff. There's some other really good books, and so I'm recommending one here called A Resilient Life. When I started packing up a few books when I was coming here for this 6-month little thing, one of the ones I threw in was this book by a fellow by the name of Gordon MacDonald. And he has another book that's getting old now. It's called How to Reorder Your Life. And it was another book that really helped me in recovery. But his book on resilient Christians. Oh man, some good stuff. Now I should tell you something about Gordon MacDonald. He's a Sabbath keeper. He keeps Sabbath on Tuesday. But his concept of Sabbath, he's got it. He just doesn't understand the Sabbath, right? He's, God has some folks out there who haven't got the theology straight yet. And, but he talks about living daily in the presence of Jesus, right? Daily worship, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. We know all these texts. These are all, these are not new to us. And so in a way, if you ever see that book or you want to track it down, it is just a marvelous little book that will really bless you. And getting through the time of the end is all about what? Trusting Jesus. We already talked about that earlier, right? Poor old Jacob had a hard time trusting the Lord, right? And some of the saints have a hard time trusting the Lord, and they're going to have a harder time. If we can have the faith of some of the, Daniel just amazes me, and there's a bunch of characters, but we just need to trust him, and he'll take care of us. But that's the key. That's how we're going to get through the crisis. Okay, finally. Eat the soup slowly and enjoy it. When you finally figure out the basics of life, just figure it out and learn to enjoy the process. And that might include slowing down. It might include changing some attitudes. It might include some healing. Now, you notice what that says. Joy is a choice that comes easier when you're what? When you're rested. Now, is joy a choice? I bet some of you have some questions about that. Is joy a choice? This is one of my favorite stories, and Pastor Dave, when I tell this story, I bet you'll figure out exactly who I'm talking about. But one of my, I was right there in the middle of this. I saw this happen, right? But when we first moved to Newfoundland, the little town we moved to, there was a young fella, 10 years younger than me, who had just moved into town. He was a cabinet maker, and a very good cabinet maker. And he had just moved into town, didn't know anybody in town, and just moved into town, was going to set up his business in this little town. Somehow our paths crossed, and somehow he adopted our family. And he was one of these very outgoing, dynamic characters that life was, he has a tremendous capacity to enjoy life. Have you noticed that? There's some people have a greater capacity to enjoy life than others. You've noticed that? My oldest daughter has that. She would never let work or some hard course enjoy or influence not having fun, just their makeup, right? Well, this guy's about the same, and he would drop into our house sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Some exciting thing happened, and he would be driving by, and he would pop in, tell us the story, and he was gone. And you never minded him coming because he always had something positive. If he happened to come at mealtime, it didn't matter what you fed him. It was the most wonderful thing. He wasn't married at the time, so any food was good. Well, this particular day, we had a lady visiting at our house about 10 o'clock in the morning. And she was miserable. In fact, she was always miserable. And I wondered at times if the major joy she got of life was making others miserable. But she had already been at our house for about 10 minutes. Had the week just about destroyed. When this young fella comes bouncing in, some exciting thing had happened, and he just had to tell somebody. And so he comes bouncing in through the door, and where we were living then in Newfoundland, nobody locked the door, nobody knocked on the door, they just came on in. And so he just comes on in, and he's bouncing in there, and these folks are not good at sizing up the seriousness of the situation. And so his radar didn't catch how serious things were. And so he just comes in there and starts telling this exciting story. And he gets about mid-story when this lady had taken all the joy she could for that month. Now, they had known each other as well. And he was mid-story. And I can't say it as nasty as she said it. I mean, you got to be in the depths of despair. But she just looked at him mid-story and said, "Every day for you's a great day, ain't it?" Only really nasty. I can't say it that nasty. Well, he was telling his story, and he was standing up still, and just kind of that kind of thing just kind of make you rock a minute. But these folks are pretty quick on the rethinking, right? And when he finally got his bearings, he looked straight back at her, and he said, "You're right. Every day for me is a great day. Because 3 years ago, I decided that every day was going to be a great day." Now, to fully appreciate that story, you need to know a little bit of his history. When he was 6 years old, his parents separated. And him and his older brother were in foster home for the next 10 years. And they experienced about every kind of abuse there is. But somehow, in the late teen years, he sorted out and worked through some of that deep-seated stress. And he made a conscious choice that for him, every day was going to be a great day. Now, him and I have been in touch over all the years. He's almost like a son. He's back in Newfoundland right now. I don't know if you even know that, but he's back in Newfoundland. And but I've talked to him a few times over the years when he's been really down. Really down. And you know what caused it every time? Exhaustion. He was just plain too tired. And I said, "Man, you got to slow down. You got to reprioritize." And a couple weeks later, he'd call up, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew he was fine. Joy is a choice. but it comes easier if you're rested. It's very hard to be positive when you're exhausted. Very hard. Now, in your worksheet, now I'm going to mention this a couple of times, but I think it follows right there. There should be a page that has 102 practical ways to cool down your stress. You see that there? I was doing a seminar years ago with a newspaper group, with their sales group, and the owner of the newspaper come up to me afterward. He says, you should have nice little list under all those 8 ways how it'll work. So I took his advice, and that's what we came up with. And you can add things. It's not exhaustive. But in a way, that's just there for your benefit. Okay, we're going to change gears for the next 20 minutes or so. Hopefully we'll have you finished here before 5. They gave me all the way to 5 o'clock. I was hoping I'd be able to let you go before that, but, I get talking, I might, and you guys are just sitting there, I might just keep going, but I'll try to be done earlier. Question? That's the page, yeah.
On the bottom of the page, some of the words are seem to
Oh, okay. Is that same in all the handouts at the bottom? Okay, I tell you what. My email address is on the bottom there. And you just email me, and I will send you a proper one with just that on it, right? Sorry about that. I don't know it must be a printer's devil. You know what a printer's devil is? Anyway, the printing gets messed up. But if you can't make that out and you want a better version, just send me an email. I'll get you the proper thing. Okay, what if you already ate the soup too hot? And that's chapter 11 in the book. So you ate the soup too hot. Now, we need to understand the difference between excessive stress and burnout. The difference between excessive stress and burnout. So excessive stress, there's a lot of confusion on this. We throw this word burnout around, and people aren't even burned out because they don't know what they're talking about. I guess they're going to come together, are they? Okay. Excessive stress is the overuse of your coping capacities. Too much activity, too much change. You're tired. These are kind of the symptoms. You're tired, mild depression, physical illness, reduced mental alertness. You're tired. I was about a year into recovering from burnout, and one of the pastors calls me up, and he says, I'm burned out. And I have a friend in Florida who has a cabin, and he said I can use it for a week. And so I'm taking a week's vacation. I'm going to Florida, but would you meet me at the airport? I need to talk to you because I'm burned out. So I happened to be living pretty close to the airport at the time, so I said, sure. So I meet him at the airport, and I listened to his story. In 5 minutes, I knew he wasn't burned out. He wasn't even close to burnout. He was tired. He'd been doing some things and wasting his time, and he needed to reprioritize some things, but he wasn't even close to burnout. So I said, take the week. Relax on the beach. Get some extra sleep. Come back and sort things out, because this isn't burnout. Because look at what burnout is. Burnout is the depletion of your coping reserves. You're overwhelmed with life. It results in complete physical and mental exhaustion. Disillusionment, cynicism, and just, you can take a wonderful Adventist school teacher, one of the best, cream of the crop, and they get to burn out, and they think they're the worst teacher on the planet. You can take the best pastor, the best carpenter, doesn't matter what the profession, right? and they get to burn out, they can't function. And so we're going to go through the stages to burnout, and you're all in one of them. Yeah, even you retired folks. We're all in one of them, right? We're all in one of them, and I hope you're in this one. I hope you're enjoying positive stress. I hope you're at the honeymoon stage. Now here's what the honeymoon stage is. It's a period of high energy and satisfaction. You're full of enthusiasm and excitement. You can work hard and long. You can use up a great amount of energy, and you just love it. So maybe you have a job that requires 8 hours work, but you can work 10 or 12, and man, you just thrive on it. You're just excited. I hope you all had a job like that. Have you all been in that place somewhere? Unfortunately, not everybody has. But I hope you've had that experience where you just, man, you just eat and think this job. Now, if you figure out how to balance that, if you go back to what we talked about, the ABCs, if you can figure out balance, if you can figure out control and how to manage that, you can stay in that stage as long as you want. There's folks that never burn out. They might get exhausted a little bit, they might get tired a little bit, but they never burn out. Burnout for me was overwork. People burn out for a number of reasons. I think of a young nurse that came to my seminar up in Fort St. John. We were doing it at a healthcare center, and there was a bunch of nurses and health staff and all the rest. And this young nurse, I don't think she was 24, came up to me after. She had 3 months before graduated from nursing school, and she was already on stress leave. And so I listened to her story for a few minutes, and it didn't take long before I realized why she was burned out. She had trained for the wrong job. If you really want to burn out, you do a job you don't have the aptitude for. And I had to tell her, listen, you trained for the wrong job. And the sooner you heal and go back and retrain for something else, the better. So that can be a cause of burnout. I think of a young Adventist teacher. I went to one of our schools, this is out in the West. They asked me to come because everybody in this school was stressed. And in those days, I had this very comprehensive stress profile that anybody could do, and we ran it through a computer, and it was very helpful for helping people figure out some of their stress stuff. And the conference was going to pay for anybody who wanted to do this. And so I go there, and they only had, 10 or 12 teachers, something like that. And man, they were all stressed except one. The principal was not stressed. I'm going to jump ahead of the story just so you don't think bad of the principal. But when it's all done, and I'm sitting down with the principal and we're talking about the situation, I said, everybody's stressed but you. How come you're not stressed? Oh, she said, I did that 20 years ago. I went through that burnout thing, and I figured that one out. That's why she wasn't burned out. But there was one of the teachers there that was burned out. Had nothing to do with the teaching, had nothing to do, even though the teaching situation in that school was difficult, this young teacher was not stressed out because of the work. He was stressed out because of a whole bunch of personal issues. There was 2 or 3 deaths in his family within about 3 to 4 months that were, tough deaths, right? There was some financial things going on. I mean, there was just a bunch of stuff. So burnout can be caused from a whole variety of things. And it can be quite different with different people. And sometimes you can just get dumped on to the point that it happens, right? But if you understand a bit of these steps to burnout, then you can find where you are, and most of the time you can back off, right? So this is the honeymoon stage. So I hope that's where you are, but a group this size, there's some of you further down the list, I'm almost certain. So then there's the burnout caution signals. This is the warning stages. Now, most of us on our way to burnout totally miss these two. We don't even know they happen, right? The first one is the fuel shortage stage. Let's go back to the honeymoon stage. You're all excited. They're paying you for 8 hours. You're working 10 or 12. Man, you just can't get enough of this job. Well, when you get to the fuel shortage stage, you're happy they're only paying you for 8 hours. You're not putting any extra in anymore. You're still doing the job, but some of the joy is missing, right? Now, stage 3 is the early warning stage. Now, at stage 3, you've progressed a little bit from stage 2 to the fact that you're having some stress warning signals. Now, we did the thing on stress warning signals, right? Man, I didn't even know what these were. I knew nothing about them. I knew nothing about burnout. And back then, like I said, even the medical folks didn't know much what it was. But at this stage, you might be having some physical signals. You might be having headaches, and you normally don't have headaches. You might be having indigestion, and there's no good reason why you're having indigestion other than you ate too much hot stuff on your pizza, right? But you're maybe not sleeping well. Normally you sleep well, but now you're not sleeping. Emotional signals. You may be having an edginess, a roughness around you that's not normal for you. See, the body's beginning to say it's feeling some pain, right? And it's usually so mild we don't even get it. Now, men are worse. Just so you know, men are worse. Women at this stage might begin to catch that, okay, something's not right. Oh, men are stupid at this stage. They don't get a clue, right? Man, I've had men at stage 6 think they're fine, all is good. And their wife dragged them to the seminar. So I could say at the end, man, you got to do something, because she's been trying, right? That's stage 3. Stage 4, you're getting into trouble. Stage 4 is the chronic symptom stage. I was probably at this stage before I ever went to Newfoundland. Probably a year and a half, 2 years before it ever really hit. A key symptom at this stage is when you're just as tired in the morning as you were the night before. You were in bed all night. You slept 8 hours. But you woke up tired. Now, if you've had a good 8 hours sleep, you should wake up how? You should wake up rested. Now, some of us old guys, some of us don't need that. I mean, I'm just surprised. Sometimes 3 or 4 hours, I wake up. I mean, I never used to wake up at 4 in the morning. I mean, I'm not one of these early birds. I mean, I know folks, man, 4 o'clock, if they're not awake, something's wrong with them, right? Well, something wrong with me if I wake up at 4, right? But now, it's amazing. I can wake up after 4 or 5 hours night's sleep, and I'm done sleeping. No, I need a nap by 11, but I'm good till 11, right? But at this state, we're talking about where you've been in bed, you've had a good night's sleep, you thought, but you haven't rested, okay? That's a good signal. At this stage, your physical symptoms become more pronounced. Your skin breaks out in hives and eczema, shortness of breath. While we were still here, I think I did tell you, I used to pastor in this district, right? When we were still here, we lived in New Glasgow, and One morning, I woke up about, like I told you, I don't wake up at 4:30. This time I woke up at 4:30, and I was itchy all over. I thought there were fleas in the bed. And I jumped up, flipped the light on, said there's, and then my wife said, what are you doing? I said, there's fleas in the bed. She said, turn the light off, there's no fleas in the bed. And it lasted for an hour. That was a couple of years before it really got serious, right? Following that, I got a mild case of the shingles. Most folks that get the shingles, unless there's something else, it tends to happen after a period of excessive stress. I had a pretty mild case, but so you have some funny physical things are happening, is really what this is. Psychological symptoms. You are emotionally exhausted. You erupt in anger in situations that before it wouldn't even bother you. I think in the Maritimes we call that flying off the handle, right? And you start having some serious depression. This is where depression, now depression is a very serious illness. And as I'm talking about depression in relation to burnout, I'm really not talking about the serious disease of depression. There's folks that have a very serious illness, and they can be not burned out and have depression, right? What I'm talking about is a depression that is caused by you've used up everything, right? And I experienced depression probably for about 6 to 8 months. And I've never had depression since, right? But it was directly related to exhaustion, right? And so that's the chronic symptom stage. You notice what it says at the bottom? You are in serious trouble, and there are still 3 stages to go. All right? Then there is the critical symptom stage. Got to get a drink here. The critical symptom stage. Have you all seen the movie Apollo 13? And you know that part where I forget all the characters, but in a way, he says, Houston, we have a problem. And he knew they weren't going to the moon. Well, at this stage, you have a serious problem. You have a serious problem. Your symptoms become critical. Chronic frustration and dissatisfaction are the rule of the day. At this stage, you might even visit a doctor. It's not so much now. I really need to update this. It's not so much now. If you were to go to the doctor now with some of these symptoms, and they run all the tests, and they don't find anything wrong with you, they will most likely take a good look at your stress. 30, 40 years ago, they didn't know what it was, right? And they run all the tests, and they would say there's basically, I remember I had 2 teachers. I was down on Vancouver Island. A husband and wife were teachers. And they came, and at the end when we talked, they diagnosed themselves at this stage. And they had just come from the doctor who had run all these tests and said, there's nothing wrong with you. Right? And that was a while ago. The medical community is much more alert to this now than they have been. All right? But at this stage, you become obsessed with your problems, and fear and depression are just constant. And most people at this stage need professional help. Now, if you're at this stage, and if you understand where you are, and if you will take what I'm sharing with you seriously and apply it in your life, you can back out of it. And nobody even needs to know. If you don't deal with it at this stage, you will go to one of the next 2. And you really don't want to go to either one. Okay? So if you don't solve it here, I was going to talk about professional help. By the way, professional help is a good counselor much more than a medical physician. Physicians are really not trained for help. Most folks, when they get to this stage, it is deep-seated stressors they need help with. And I can tell you, the regular doctors are just not trained for that. That is really where a good counselor, you need a good counselor that can be very helpful, and a few sessions they can get you back on the right track. But you need to resolve some of the deep-seated stressors. If you don't get it, you go to the crisis stage. This is where I was the summer of 1985. And Brother Dave is back there. I want to tell you, I was fortunate. Because as I was going through burnout, the conference was very helpful to me. Brother Dave, as the president, he had no idea what in the world I was going through, and I didn't know either. But he, just somehow we got through it, right? And him and I had some disagreements later that were totally unrelated to burnout. But I want to tell you, just the fact that I could have some flexibility and some time, even though we didn't know what was going on, was extremely helpful. And but this is where I was the summer of 1985. And this is the crisis stage. Pessimism and cynicism develop with a callous, insensitive disregard for people. I want to tell you, somebody comes along and they say, listen, guy, just don't worry, be happy. You want to throw a rock at him. At this stage, you are at no mood for happiness. And if you want to really make yourself more miserable, take your kids to Disney World. I mean, remember I told you the story? We went all the way down to Florida. Well, you go to Florida with a couple of young kids. Our kids were probably a little too young at the time, but what's the character at Disney World with the big ears? Mickey Mouse. Scared our youngest one almost to death. I think she was terrorized for a few years. But you don't go to Disney World at this stage. I mean, it's a happy place. At least they pretend to be. And you're miserable. You come away from it more miserable. At this stage, you feel like a trapped animal. That's really the signal here. If you're feeling trapped, you're probably here. You know, at this stage, I think I felt trapped, but I couldn't identify it. I didn't really identify it till probably 3 or 4 months later when we were back in Newfoundland, and one of the other pastors had already gone through some burnout and recovered. And he asked me the question, do you feel trapped? And that was the first I began to realize that I didn't even know about these stages then, but that's a nasty place to be. And so you do not want to go there, all right? Again, though, if you are there, you can back out of it. You may need some help. You may need some flexibility, but if you are very, very serious at this stage, I have had folks at this stage that I have said to them, don't even go talk to your boss. Go talk to your doctor. You need anywhere between 3 and 6 months stress leave. And the reason I didn't want them to talk to their boss is I just knew the boss is going to talk them into waiting at least another month. Because the boss had no idea how useless they were, right? And how much trouble this same person causing on the job. Because you're no help to anybody at that stage, right? And you're no help to yourself. But sometimes, and maybe I should just share this little part of this story. There's people at this stage, and you would never know. We are very good at covering this up. I was doing some stress seminars with one of the parks in BC. They had about 75 staff and about, I think it was 5 administrators. And so I did a lot of work with those administrators because they had me come, several times. And of these 5 administrators, there was 3 of them that were a little stressed. There was this one guy, man, if anybody seemed to be a model administrator managing his stress, he was it. And again, the stress profile I mentioned earlier, they were offering that to all their employees. And I must have went back the 4th or 5th time. And this one guy, this administrator, he says to me, I think I ought to do that stress profile. So I gave it to him. And it was at the end of the session. Everybody had left. He didn't want anybody to know he was picking up one of them. And so I take it home, I run this profile, and I look at this thing, and I am shocked. It's one of the worst I have ever seen. So I immediately called him up, and I said, man, you and I need to get together soon. He said, I thought so. I'm coming to Kelowna tomorrow. When can we get together? One of the worst cases of burnout. And I said, man, you need to go see the doctor tomorrow. I know your fellow administrators. I will tell them that I sent you there, right? And when I told them, they were shocked. Nobody had any idea. But he was at least smart enough at that point to get some help. Now, you don't want to go to the next stage. Next stage is hitting the wall. Another illustration I have, this is, where you have a car and the engine blows, right? This is where you lose control of your life. I came probably as close as you can come to this without it happening. You completely lose control. You become totally dysfunctional. You feel like a total failure. Hitting the wall comes from the marathon runners. You know these marathon runners that run these 26 miles? Some of them will go 15, they're just done. Some of them will go 25, and they just collapse. They can't go another inch, right? They just use up all their glycogen. They're just done. Well, this is the parallel with hitting the wall with burnout. Now, follow along as I read this. I'm going to come over here so I can see this a little better. But this last paragraph, I want to read it with you. Hitting the wall. When people reach this stage of burnout, their adaptive energy is depleted just like the runner's glycogen. They lose control of their lives, and for some, it puts an end of their working careers forever. You meet some of these people in Skid Row, in prison, in mental institutions, others in their lives in suicide. Now you have a better understanding of why they're there. It is possible to hit the wall and recover, but it is not probable. Now, I know some folks that have hit the wall and will never work again. In fact, I know some pastors that have hit the wall and will never pastor again. But I know a number of folks. I also know a number of folks that hit the wall and recovered. I think of one guy who came to my seminar. He comes up to me afterward, big smile on his face. He says, I hit the wall 6 months ago, and I'm back to stage 6. And he was all excited about being at stage 6. Now, stage 6 is an improvement if you hit the wall, right? So that's the stages, right? And you may not be anywhere near those, but you may know somebody who is. Because I want to tell you, there's a lot of folks out there. And the folks that are highest at risk for burnout are those in the people profession. Any of the people professions, teachers, nurses, doctors, healthcare workers of any stripe, you name it, clergy, anyone dealing with people are at the highest risk. And some of the old statistics that I knew when I was a little more active in this field would put with teachers, for instance. You have a group of 100 teachers. At any given time, 30 or 40 of them are in some of the advanced stages of burnout. The same is true with pastors. That was then. It's probably worse now. But that's the... and so there's the 102 things again. I want to tell you the best way to avoid burnout is practicing the 8 ways. Oh man, that thing's all messed up on there. But anyway, you know what it is. The best way to prevent burnout is practice the 8 ways to cool off the soup. If you are in some of the advanced stages of burnout, you need to go back and prioritize and practice those. Because you can heal, you can recover, and that is the good news. Now, we don't really have time to do this exercise, so I'm going to give you this as homework. This is the homework, because I do want to get you done by 5, and I do have a couple more stories. Improving the recipe for a better soup. So here's your homework. Now, some of you will do this while I'm talking about it. Some of you are going to have to think about it overnight and maybe half of tomorrow. But think this through. I want you to pick something that you're going to start doing that you currently are not doing that's going to help you cool off your stress. I have given you a whole bunch of things. There may be some other things that I got to tell you this story. It just flew through my head. Probably the most difficult group that I ever did a stress seminar with was in Oshawa, Ontario, at the College Park Church. A friend of mine was the associate pastor there. Oh, this is a few years ago. We only had about 30 people. See, nobody comes from the community for a stress seminar unless they're very stressed. Now, some of you folks came just to see what's going on. And some of you came because you need some help with stress. But nobody comes to takes 3 hours on some night of the week to go to a stress seminar unless they're stressed. But this group stands out in my mind because there was about 25 or 30 of them. And when we did the stress, I could tell something wasn't right because I couldn't get anybody to smile. I couldn't get anybody to laugh, nothing. They were so serious. I thought, man, what's happening? My jokes all died. What's happening? And then we do the stress test. Nobody in that group had a score above 40. Now, you all know what that means, right? Didn't have a score above 40. And when I did the thing about, short-term, long, man, it was all long-term. And so we took a break, and there was a guy sitting we were at tables, and he was sitting right in front of me. And already I tried to figure out if I could get that guy to smile, but he was just serious. It was, So in the break, I tried to chat with him and kind of loosen him up. No, he wasn't going to be loosened. So anyway, we do the rest of the seminar, and we get to this part. And somehow I didn't tell too many stories, so I had time to do the exercise. And so I said, okay, let's talk about this for a bit. Anybody willing to share what you wrote in besides start, that you're going to start doing? I mean, it barely got out of my mouth. And this guy, who hadn't said a thing, who just looked dull all night, he says, first thing tomorrow, I am going to start proceedings for a divorce. What do you do? I didn't even know how to respond. But I guess that was his big problem. And I was at a loss for words. So he said, I've been trying to save this marriage for years. It's done. He finally got it. See, that's how it takes men a hard time to face some realities. But that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. But I want you to choose something you're going to start doing that's going to help you manage your stress. Then something you're going to stop doing. All right? And then something you're going to keep doing, because you've all been doing some things that have been working. Maybe it's been your spiritual experience with the Lord. Maybe it's been you've been getting exercise. You've been eating good. Who knows what it is. But something you're going to keep doing. Okay, we need to wrap up. And I'm around here, and I'm going to be around here all week. So if you do have some questions, I would like to take some time for questions, but I got to quit. These are our two books. I don't even have a copy of the one for teen stress, but they do have them over in ABC, and they're there. They're also available on Amazon, but Amazon, I think, is only I don't think they have the actual book. I think they have the one you read on your computer. What do they call that? That one. Now, here's another interesting one. If some of you are interested, because you're Adventist, you could have access to this. But in Australia, the ABC in Australia, and I forget what in the world, you email me and I'll dig it out for you, but they have folks that have read both of these. They have audio books. I don't know if ABC here has access to that or not, but somebody put them on audio books. And you can get them in audio and have them down on your phone or wherever. So anyway, they're available. And okay, final little story. Anybody have just a really urgent question or just a general comment before I have the final story and we're going to be done? Okay, good. You're all ready for supper. This little story comes from Australia. It says that when the trainees for the Royal Australian Air Force were given an examination, one question read, "What is the first thing you should do when you're piloting an aircraft and the King of England fell out the back seat?" Now that's a good question for an aspiring pilot. One trainee said, "I'd swoop down and try to catch her." It's him. See, since I did this, we've changed from queen to king. Another said I'd fly off and disappear. Another one said I'd commit suicide. They had all kinds of funny little answers. So what's the correct answer? If you're flying an airplane and King Charles III falls out the back seat, what's the very first thing you should do? Well, you should adjust the trim tabs to compensate for the loss of weight in the rear section. In other words, you got to keep the plane flying, right? And I just hope that somehow this afternoon you've got a few thoughts, a few ideas that's going to help you manage your stress better, particularly as Adventists as we go into the stress of the final lap. We're in the final lap. And I hope you have something that will just get you to the Lord and hang on for dear life. Well, actually, I used to pray that. I used to pray, "Lord, help me hang on." I don't pray that anymore. I pray, "Lord, just hang on to me." Because I don't trust myself, but I trust you, right? Let me pray with you before we go. Our Father in heaven, we don't know just how to thank you and praise you for the privilege of life. We just thank you for the privilege of some stress. It means we're alive. And Lord, we just want to praise you for the gift of redemption, for salvation. That there's nothing we can do except choose. And Lord, if there's anyone here who hasn't really chosen you, give them grace to make that choice. And Lord, I especially pray for this group as we've talked about stress today. I know hardly any of these folks here very well. But Lord, you know them. You know their heart. You know their need. And so Lord, I just pray your Holy Spirit come and fill them and draw close to them and anoint them anew with your Spirit. And as they're here this week, if there's healing they need, give them that healing. Give them that grace. And then, Lord, watch over and keep us safely through to your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, have a great evening. It's you've been a great audience, man. You have been patient. I haven't had a seminar this long for a long time, and but anyway, it's been a privilege. You have a great week. Okay, good night. Question? Oh yeah, don't forget your pens. All the pens, get them all to Julie here. As you leave, we need all your pens. You can keep the handouts, but turn in your pens. Do we have any extra handouts? Julia, have we got any extra handouts, or we use them all? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, sure. Just a second. I got to get a drink. Yeah.